I'd like to introduce you to Rob Undersander. He's a millionaire from Minnesota who legally collected $6,000 in food stamps. That's right, a millionaire on food stamps legally. Now here's the interesting part. He didn't want them. He just wanted to make a point. Rob was shocked to discover that in his state, SNAP benefits were based on how much money you're bringing in, not how much money you already have. That didn't seem right to him, so he decided to test the system himself. He walked in, picked up an application, and hoped they would turn him down. They didn't. They couldn't. In his words, Rob begged them to find some reason to deny his application. But the office workers don't make the rules. They had to follow the law. And the law said that Rob's assets didn't matter. He met the income limits, so just like that, he was approved for $278 a month in food benefits. Rob's experiment shines a light on the complexities and loopholes in the system, sparking conversations about who benefits from SNAP and why. And naturally, those conversations are putting a spotlight on the role of asset limits in the food stamps program. Asset limits get a lot of hate, usually because they're set so stupidly low. And as a result, a lot of states have just removed them entirely. But there's an important reason that asset limits are part of the food stamps eligibility calculation. Income limits are based on how much money that you're bringing in. But asset limits focus on how much money is available to you. Assets can include things like the value of savings accounts, stock options, vehicles, and other things that could be sold for cash. Very wealthy individuals tend to have more assets than income because their wealth is usually tied up in what we often refer to as unrealized gains. According to the Center for Law and Social Policy, 34 states have eliminated the SNAP asset limits for most recipients. And that creates the opportunity for this program to be exploited by wealthier individuals who manipulate their wealth so that it looks smaller than it actually is, usually for tax purposes. It's a difficult situation because there are good reasons to waive or increase the asset limits for this program. The strict low limits in place at the federal level have created a definite hardship for many low-income families. The standard federal asset limit for SNAP households is just $2,750, which means that a low-income family that depends on these benefits can't save up any money for emergencies, or even scrape together enough to move into a new place without endangering their food benefits. Now, households that include someone who is elderly or disabled are allowed to save a little bit more, but that limit is still just $4,250. This means they can't save up for medical emergencies, and they often can't hold on to life insurance policies or prepaid burial plots either. These asset limits were originally designed to ensure that food benefits only went to those who needed them most, but they've had the side effect of trapping people in an endless cycle of poverty that they can't escape. Without the ability to save for emergencies, these households are left vulnerable to unexpected expenses, such as medical emergencies or car repairs. In the event of such an emergency, these families might have no other option than to go into debt, often borrowing money from very predatory and expensive sources like payday loans or pawn shops. This obviously just makes a bad situation worse. Now, in many cases, this asset limit test can hinder upward mobility, paralyzing a family in the lowest income brackets. Saving for a security deposit on a new rental property can push them over the limit. So low-income families may find themselves stuck in substandard living conditions or even homeless. They may be unable to get better jobs because they can't save up enough to get a better vehicle, because amassing enough funds for the down payment could jeopardize their food assistance. These limits can get in the way of saving up for education, buying their own home, saving up for retirement, or even starting a business. It can be disastrous for low-income families. Now, on the other hand, completely eliminating those asset limits comes with an entirely different set of risks. The biggest risk is obviously the potential for abuse. Asset limits are designed to ensure that those with significant financial resources do not take advantage of a system intended for those in dire need. Removing these limits could allow individuals who have considerable assets to get food assistance just because their income looks low on paper. This could undermine public support for the program and fuel debates about welfare abuse, strengthening the arguments made by people who want to see this program dismantled in the first place. And that just makes it more likely that this assistance will be taken away from those who need it the most. Now, another primary concern is about the potential increase in program costs. Without asset limits, more individuals could qualify for SNAP benefits, potentially expanding the number of beneficiaries and thereby increasing the financial burden on the program. This could strain government budgets and might lead to challenges in sustaining the program long term. There's also the question of prioritization. Without asset limits, the program might see an influx of applicants who are more financially stable, which could potentially divert resources away from those in the most critical need. We already have a massive problem with SNAP backlogs in this country, where states can't keep up with the paperwork that they are already required to do. It would be a challenge to balance the goal of providing assistance to those who need it while preventing the system from being completely overwhelmed by applicants who, despite having a low income, might have substantial assets to fall back on. That's why some states have simply decided to increase the asset limits instead of completely eliminating them. Texas recently increased the asset limit for vehicles in the state, which allowed more people to get and keep their food benefits. Several other states, including Idaho, have increased their standard asset limit to $5,000 to give low-income families in their area a little more flexibility and breathing room. Nebraska has raised the asset limit to $25,000, allowing low-income families to save even more. However, in some states like Michigan, the asset limit has been completely removed, and some lawmakers are concerned. For example, then House Leader Matt Hall said, "Without this test measuring people's wealth, even lottery winners and other millionaires could rake in food stamps paid for with our tax dollars that should be going to those who truly need help feeding their families. Offering food stamps to the rich does nothing to put food on the tables of Michiganders in need." He's not wrong. Without an asset limit, it's possible that even billionaires like Elon Musk could technically qualify for food stamps because their substantial wealth is structured in a way that is not reflected as traditional income. Ultimately, balancing the needs of low-income families with safeguarding the integrity of the SNAP program requires thoughtful policy adjustments. Instead of just completely eliminating the asset limits, there are 5 steps states could consider to achieve a better balance. First, asset limits could be increased. Directly raising the overall asset limits for SNAP eligibility would acknowledge that current asset thresholds are too low, especially in areas with a higher cost of living. By increasing these limits, states could ensure that families who have modest savings or assets but still struggle with food insecurity could access the support they need without being penalized for trying to be more financially responsible. States could also implement graduated asset limits, where asset thresholds increase with family size or other factors. This approach recognizes the varying financial needs of larger families or those with special circumstances, allowing them to save more for emergencies without putting their SNAP benefits in danger. Asset limits should be regularly adjusted for inflation as well. Asset limits could be modified to reflect the cost of living in different regions. This approach acknowledges that the cost of living varies significantly across the United States, and even within states, ensuring that the limits are more realistically aligned with local economic conditions. States could exclude certain types of assets from consideration as well. They could remove certain types of assets from the eligibility calculation, like retirement savings, education savings accounts, or a primary vehicle. This could encourage low-income families to invest in their long-term stability and mobility without risk of losing their benefits. Asset limits could also be waived in certain circumstances. When Michigan waived the asset limits, the governor pointed out that the previous limit made it difficult for people who were recently laid off to get food stamps. If that's the concern that they want to address, they could theoretically implement a temporary waiver for people who were freshly laid off. Such a waiver could be structured to last for a set period, like 90 days, or could be aligned with the duration of unemployment benefits. This targeted approach would provide immediate relief to those who need it without opening up the program to people with very high amounts of assets. Asset limits are an important tool to protect the integrity of the SNAP program overall. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other videos on EBT benefits. I will see you there.